Today we're diving into something quite foundational, phenomenology. It's an approach that really asks us to step back from our usual ways of thinking, especially purely empirical ones.
Absolutely. And our main guide for this is Edmund Husserl, specifically his major work, Ideas, well, the first volume, General Introduction to Pure Phenomenology.
Right. It's a key text. Husserl was really trying to rethink how we understand consciousness experience itself, looking for something more fundamental than, say, psychology or just common sense gives us.
Exactly. Ideas lays out the groundwork. It's about understanding the very structures of consciousness systematically.
So our goal here is to unpack some of the core concepts from ideas. We'll look at this relationship between fact and essence he talks about, what consciousness is according to Husserl, and this key method he developed, the phenomenological reduction. And the aim is really to give you, our listener, a solid grasp of this influential way of thinking, including some of its specific terms, without getting completely lost in the more dense academic weeds.
Which can be a challenge with Husserl sometimes. It's also worth remembering, like you hinted, that Ideas I was meant to be just the start.
Right. The planned trilogy.
Yes. Volumes 2 and 3 came out later, posthumously, but the original plan was broader. Volume 1 sets up the method, the reductions, the basic structures. The later parts were meant to delve into how phenomenology connects with the sciences, both natural and human, and ultimately the idea of philosophy itself.
Okay, so knowing that context helps frame what we're focusing on today from Volume 1.
Definitely. It gives a sense of the larger project.
Good. So let's start where Husserl does more or less this distinction between fact and essence. He talks about the natural standpoint. What's that about?
The natural standpoint is basically our default setting. It's how we ordinarily experience the world. All our knowledge starts there with an experience, right? And the world is just everything out there, the total field we investigate.
So in this mode, things like true being, real being in the world, they all seem to kind of mean the same thing. They overlap.
Pretty much, yeah. From that standpoint, the sciences are sciences of the world, dealing with facts. They study what is, spatio-temporally.
Okay, so science is a fact. But then he contrasts this with essence. How does that work?
Well, think about any experience. It posits something real, an individual thing here and now with these specific properties. But Husserl points out its essence, its fundamental whatness could be different.
Meaning, like this specific cup could have been blue instead of white or made yesterday instead of last year, but it's still essentially a cup.
The specific facts about it are contingent, they could be otherwise. But its essence, what makes it a cup, persists. And yet you can't really pull them apart entirely.
So fact and essence are distinct, but inseparable.
That's the key. He says the contingency of factuality, the matter-of-factness, is actually correlated with an essential necessity, an essential universality. Every contingent thing, every fact has an essential being. He calls it the eidos, and we can grasp that eidos in its purity.
Eidos, okay. Can we make that more concrete? You mentioned the cup.
Or think of a musical tone. A specific C-sharp played right now is a fact, but it has an essence, toneness, maybe even acoustic phenomenonness more broadly. That essence applies to any C-sharp or any tone.
I see. And the same for a physical object, like a book.
Right. Its factuality is this book, here, now. Its essence includes things like being a material thing, having spatial dimensions, temporal duration, maybe informational content carrier. These essential features group individuals into what Husserl calls regions or categories.
And how do we access these essences, these eidos? It's not just through seeing or touching the individual fact, is it?
No, that's individual intuition, sense experience, which gives us the object in its bodily selfhood, as he puts it. Essential intuition is different. It's a direct seeing, a primordial data intuition that grasps the essence itself as self-given. It's a distinct way of knowing.
So every fact has this essential core, and understanding that core gives us a deeper kind of knowledge. And these regions you mentioned, like material thing or sound, seem important for organizing knowledge.
Very important. He sees each region, this highest material genus, as having a corresponding regional eidetic science or regional ontology. Think of it like the pure science of that category's essence.
An ontology for each region.
Yes. And these regional ontologies provide, he argues, the essential theoretical foundations for the factual sciences. The pure, necessary truths about material thingness in general can't be irrelevant to physics, for example, or the essence of life for biology.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like finding the underlying rules of the game for each domain. Now, above these specific material regions, he also talks about formal ontology. What's that?
Formal ontology is even more general. It's the eidetic science of object in general. Anything whatsoever that can be thought about or be the subject of a statement. Husserl connects it to pure logic or mathesis universalis.
So it's studying the absolute basic structures of objectness itself, regardless of whether it's a physical thing, a number, a feeling.
It looks for the necessary structures of any object as an object. The basic concepts in formal logic, like identity, relation, unity, these are the logical categories that define the essence of object in general. They're purely analytical.
And related to this, he brings in syntactical objectivities.
Right. These arise when we think about objects and relate them using syntactical forms. Things like being a property of, being related to, being a set of. The categories here are syntactical substance, relation, unity, number, and so on.
So as we think in predicate, objects take on these forms, creating new, higher-level objects like qualities, relationships, collections.
Precisely. Our thinking actively structures our experience, creating these complex objectivities.
It's quite a layered picture he's building, from this specific fact up to the most abstract structures of thought. Now, Husserl was quite critical of what he saw as misinterpretations of phenomenology, these naturalistic misconstructions. What was he reacting against?
A major one, especially back then, was confusing phenomenology with empirical psychology. People thought, oh, it's about consciousness, inner experience, so it's just a descriptive branch of psychology.
But he strongly rejected that.
Vehemently, he insisted the difference was one of principle, not just scope or terminology. His analogy was geometry. And natural science, geometry isn't just a part of physics, right? It deals with pure essences, idealities. Phenomenology, for him, does something similar for consciousness.
So the subject matter consciousness doesn't automatically make it psychology in the empirical sense.
Not at all. Another misconstruction came from empiricism. Empiricists heard Husserl's call to get back to the things themselves and thought, great, that means grounding everything in sense experience.
But Husserl meant something different by things and experience.
Yes. For Husserl, facts aren't just facts of nature accessible only through the senses. An experience is broader than just empirical observation. Genuine science, he argued, needs judgments grounded in immediate, primordial data intuitions. And that includes the intuition of essences, not just sensing particulars.
So he's pushing back against the idea that essence intuition, or ideation as he calls it, is just some kind of linguistic trick or mental abstraction.
He criticized dismissing it as grammatical hypostatizations. He argued that mathematical truths, for instance, aren't just derived from experiences of our fancy, but are grasped directly with insight into their intrinsic meaning within consciousness.
Rejecting psychologism and narrow empiricism seems absolutely central then. Okay, so to actually do this kind of investigation, to access pure consciousness and essences, he introduces the method, the phenomenological reduction. How does this work?
The reduction is the key methodological step. It's designed to help us break free from that natural standpoint we talked about and access this new world of pure consciousness.
And it involves bracketing. That's a famous Husserlian term. What gets bracketed?
Essentially, we bracket the general thesis of the natural attitude. That's the underlying, usually unnoticed belief in the independent existence of the world, exactly as we perceive it. So we suspend judgment about the existence of the physical world, our own psychological states as natural events, cultural objects, even scientific theories as facts about that independent world.
Suspend judgments. We're not denying the world exists, but we're putting that belief out of action for the purpose of the analysis.
Precisely. It's not ontological denial, it's a methodological shift. The goal is to achieve a free outlook upon transcendentally purified phenomena, to focus exclusively on consciousness and how the world appears within it.
By doing this, the phenomena we study become, what do you call them? Non-real.
Non-real or irreal, yes. The reduction purifies psychological phenomena of their assumed reality, their place in the real world. Phenomenology then becomes the science of the essential being of these transcendentally reduced phenomena. It studies essences within pure consciousness.
And this deliberate shift, this bracketing, is what allows a truly foundational investigation.
That's the claim. By neutralizing our naive realism, we can finally examine consciousness itself and how it constitutes experience. Husserl knew the terms were tricky, stressing that clear understanding comes from the careful inquiry itself, not just neat definitions.
Okay, so we've bracketed the world. What's left? What is this pure consciousness, and how does intentionality fit in?
Well, Husserl points out this fascinating parallelism between a potential phenomenological psychology, studying consciousness empirically but carefully, and transcendental phenomenology, the philosophical version.
Parallelism.
Yeah.
Meaning they look at similar stuff, but interpret it differently.
The content might seem the same: perceptions, judgments, feelings, but the standpoint changes everything. Psychology, even a careful descriptive one, usually operates within the natural standpoint, taking the world for granted. Transcendental phenomenology shifts the focus to how consciousness constitutes that world, making it the truly foundational philosophical science for Husserl.
So the change in perspective is the crucial philosophical move.
Absolutely. And that leads right into intentionality. For Husserl, this is the defining feature of consciousness. It's always consciousness of something. The cogito, I think, always implies a cogitatum, something thought about.
Perception is perception of a tree. Remembering is remembering of an event. Judging is judging of a state of affairs.
There's always this directedness, this glancing ray from the ego towards an object. Consciousness isn't a self-contained box. It reaches out.
And it's not just the main object of focus, right? He talks about a background.
Yes, the objective background. When you focus on one thing, other things are still co-present, appearing in the periphery of your awareness. They're part of the total intentional field.
Within this field, he makes another distinction. Sensile hyle and intentional morpha. Sounds a bit Greek.
It is. Hyle means matter. Morphe means form. So sensihyle is the raw sensory data colors, sounds, textures, the stuff of sensation. Intentional morphe is the meaning-giving form imposed by consciousness, how that raw data gets interpreted and structured.
So going back to the tree example, the green and brown patches of color are the hyle.
Sort of, yes. The raw sensory input.
And the morphe is the active consciousness that synthesizes that data into the unified meaning tree.
The hyle is the material for the intentional informing or meaning bestowal. The perceived tree, as meant, that's the intentional object, is a unity constituted out of the flow of sensory data, hyle, through the structuring activity of consciousness.
And he also says our perception of things is always inadequate.
In a specific sense, yes. Any physical thing is only ever given through modes of appearing, or profiles, Abschattungen. You only see one side at a time. There's a core of what's really presented, but also margins, and always an indeterminacy that points towards possible future perceptions that could fill it out.
So you never grasp the whole thing all at once. Perception is always incomplete, pointing beyond itself.
Right. It inherently suggests more viewpoints, more aspects to be revealed. It's essentially perspectival and open-ended.
Okay, so after the reduction, after we bracketed the natural world, what's left is the field of study, the phenomenological residuum.
The residuum is pure consciousness itself, with all its structures. The reduction suspends our belief in the independent being of the natural world, physical things, psychological processes as natural events, cultural objects, sciences as cultural facts, values, laws, etc., all things constituted within the natural standpoint.
So it affects all the sciences that depend on that standpoint.
Yes, their naive ontological assumptions are put aside. But crucially, the essential structures of consciousness itself remain. And even studying consciousness requires understanding its a priori essential laws. You can't just do empirical psychology on the residuum. You need an eidetic science of consciousness.
And he makes a sharp distinction between the being of consciousness and the being of the world.
A very sharp one. Consciousness has immanent, absolute being. The world has transcendent, relative, contingent being. They aren't just two kinds of things side by side. There's an abyss between them, he says. Consciousness doesn't appear prospectively like things do. It's, in principle, absolutely self-given, while the world is always given inadequately through appearances.
That's a radical prioritization of consciousness. To analyze this residuum, he introduces Noesis and Noema. What do these terms capture?
They're the two fundamental poles of any intentional act. Noesis, from nous, mind, is the experiencing act itself, the perceiving, the judging, the remembering, the how of consciousness. Noema, from noema, thought, or what is thought, is the experience as experience, the objective correlate within the experience, the perceived as such, the judged as such, the remembered as such, the what.
So back to the tree. The act of perceiving is the noesis.
Yes.
And the perceived tree as such, the tree precisely as it appears in this act of perception, is the noema.
Full noema, the sense of the object for consciousness in that moment. And crucially, this noema, the perceived tree as such, isn't in the perception like a component part, that would be psychologism. It belongs to the essence of the experience. It's the objective correlate.
So there's a parallelism here, too, between the noetic act and the nomadic correlate.
Yes, a strict correlation. But we have to be careful, he warns, not to confuse the real constituents of the experience, the noetic processes, with the non-real noematic sense or object as meant.
It requires careful dissection of the experience. He also talks about a neutrality modification. What's being neutralized here?
This is different from the main reduction, though related. It's about neutralizing the positional character of an act, the belief, disbelief, assumption, doubt. You take an act, like believing the sky is blue, and you neutralize the belief aspect.
So you're not doubting it or affirming it. You're just
Right.
considering it.
It's not doubt or indecision. The belief is still there, but it's set out of action, bracketed in a different way. You're contemplating the belief content as a mere thought, a mere idea, without committing to its truth or reality.
Like entertaining a possibility.
Yes, very much like that. He says this suspensory bracket is important for entering phenomenology, too. It lets us look at the structure of belief or desire or judgment without getting caught up in whether it's true or false, real or unreal.
So neutralized consciousness doesn't make real claims about the world.
Right, it deals in the as-if. Even imagination involves this neutrality modification. The imagined object might have an attentional background, but it doesn't lead to real positings about existence.
Interesting. And what about vagueness and distinctness? How does that fit into the analysis of consciousness?
Husserl notes that thoughts or intentions don't always pop up fully formed and clear. They can emerge vaguely, indistinctly, kind of lurking in the background.
Like having an idea on the tip of your tongue.
Something like that, yes. Then, a focused personal glance, as he puts it, can grasp the nomadic core, even if still inarticulately at first. This can then lead to a clearer, more distinct unfolding of the idea or a distinct memory. It's a process of clarification within consciousness, and it applies not just to thoughts, but all kinds of acts. And even if we try to study this pure consciousness factually, like focusing on individual thoughts or feelings within the bracketed realm,
we still can't escape the need for what Husserl calls a priori consciousness. We still rely on our grasp of the essential truths about consciousness itself to even make sense of those individual conscious facts.
So you can't really do a science of facts about consciousness without implicitly understanding its essential structures. The eidetic level is fundamental.
Correct. The essential truths are unavoidable for understanding the domain. And this loops back again to the structure within intentionality, those noetic and noematic structures.
Okay, let's unpack noesis and noema a bit more then. We said noesis is the act, noema is the content or meant.
Exactly. That two-sidedness is crucial. The noema, the meant as such, is really the core focus when we describe experience phenomenologically. If we describe the noema purely, focusing on just how the object is intended,
We can isolate the core intentional object itself, separate from how it might appear moment to moment.
Husserl talks about the central nomadic phase. This is the core object, the objective unity, the stable self-sane X that underlies all the different ways it might be presented or the different predicates we might attribute to it.
The X that remains the same whether I see the cube from this angle or that angle, in this light or that light.
That's the idea, that stable X. And then he talks about posited meaning, or thoughts. This combines the core meaning, the sin, which is closely related to the noema. Yes, the mode of belief or positing. Is it perceived as actual? Is it merely imagined, judged to be true? That's the phonetic part. So you can have simple single-membered meanings, like just perceiving something, or complex many-membered ones, like making a judgment that links several meanings together.
And what about when we're just daydreaming or imagining things? How does that fit?
That's the neutrality modification. Consciousness can neutralize its positing. The belief character, the this is real part, gets switched off in a sense. It becomes an as if.
So imagining a unicorn involves a neutralized positing of unicorn existence.
Exactly. And the objects of these neutralized acts, the imagined unicorn, they don't have the same kind of determinate being as something perceived as actual. You can't really predicate things of them in the same robust way.
Interesting. Okay, another piece seems to be time. How does time consciousness fit into this picture of pure consciousness?
Well, it's fundamental. Husserl speaks of the unity of the immanent time consciousness. This is like the background flow, the stream that holds all our individual experiences together.
Like the riverbed for the stream of consciousness.
That's a good analogy. Every single experience, a perception, a thought, a memory, unfolds within this continuous original time consciousness. It's what connects one moment of consciousness to the next, creating the coherent flow of our subjective life.
So it's the ultimate container for all the noetic and noematic happenings.
In essence, yes. Consciousness binds consciousness together within this temporal flow. Okay, let's revisit intentionality with Noesis and Noema. How does it play out in something complex like judgment or willing?
Take a predicative judgment, like the rose is red. Husserl sees this as a founded or derivative act. The noema here isn't just the rose or redness, but the entire judged content as such, the proposition itself as meant.
So the judgment itself becomes the nomadic object.
In a way, yes. The acts of presenting the rose and redness become part of the judging act, and their nomata, the presented rose, the presented red, get structured into the subject-predicate form within the overall judgment noema.
And something similar happens in the sphere of the will.
He suggests so. A resolution or act of willing has its noetic phases perhaps grounded in valuing something, positing a state of affairs as desirable, and the resolve itself, the decision as meant, is the specific normatic correlate, absorbing the object of will.
So the Noesis and Noema structure holds across different kinds of conscious acts. What about self-evidence and reason? How does phenomenology ground these?
Self-evidence, evidence, is a key concept. For Husserl, it's not just a strong feeling of certainty, it's a specific kind of consciousness, a positional belief-based, doxic, related to opinion belief, and adequate primordial dater consciousness, meaning the object is given directly and completely in a way that intrinsically excludes otherness.
More than just seeing something clearly.
Yes, it's about the adequacy of the givenness in relation to the meaning intention. Perceiving a landscape might be vivid, but it's inadequate perspectival. Grasping an essential truth for Husserl can potentially achieve adequate self-evidence. The Phenomenology of Reason explores the conditions for such rational positing.
And these conditions are rooted in the structure of consciousness itself.
The Ladetic positing consciousness operates under certain norms, which are essential laws connecting noesis and noema. Reason is acting in accordance with these laws, unreason is violating them, and different object regions allow for different kinds or degrees of self-evidence.
So formal logic, for example, finds its grounding here.
Yes, it arises from the a priori conditions for rational certainty regarding purely formal analytic relationships. Phenomenology doesn't develop logic, but it analyzes the meaning and intuitive fulfillment of its axioms and concepts.
For Husserl, self-evidence isn't just a feeling, it's a specific mode of consciousness. It's a positional, meaning it posits something as true, doxic, belief-related, and adequate dater consciousness.
Adequate dater, meaning it gives the object completely and perfectly.
The object is presented so fully and clearly that it excludes any possibility of being otherwise. The belief, the thesis, is perfectly motivated by the givenness of the object itself. There's no room for doubt. This, for Husserl, is an act of reason.
So true reason is grounded in this kind of direct, self-evident insight.
Ultimately, yes. The whole study of reason, what he calls the phenomenology of reason, relies on this foundation of general phenomenology we've been outlining. Anytime consciousness posits something, their tomatetic consciousness, it operates under certain norms, certain essential laws governing how noesis and noema connect properly. Finally, Husserl briefly touches on the transcendence of the thing and intersubjectivity. How do we get from individual consciousness to a shared objective world?
Well, the essence of a thing, noema, the perceived thing as such, already implies infinite possibilities for further consistent perceptions that would further determine it. It points beyond the current perception.
Back to that idea of inadequacy and open-endedness.
No single perception is final. It's always part of a potential regulated unfolding. But how do we get to the idea of one identical thing experienced by multiple subjects?
Right, the shared world.
This requires, Husserl indicates, though it's developed more fully in later works like Cartesian Meditations, a higher level of constitution. The constitution of the other subject through empathy. Through understanding others as conscious subjects like ourselves, we can constitute an intersubjective identical thing, the object as existing for everyone, uniting the diverse perceptual manifolds of different individuals.
So objectivity, in the sense of a shared world, is constituted through intersubjective agreement, mediated by empathy.
That's the direction he points in Ideas I. It's a complex layering. Individual constitution of perceptual objects, then the constitution of other subjects, then the constitution of a common world.
Wow. Okay. This has been a really dense but fascinating journey through some core ideas in Husserl's ideas. We've touched on that crucial factessence distinction.
And their inseparability.
The phenomenological reduction as the method to access pure consciousness.
The bracketing, the shift in standpoint.
The intentional structure of consciousness itself, with noesis and noema.
Consciousness always being of something.
And how this approach seeks to provide a foundation for understanding reason, knowledge, and even objectivity.
It's really about getting to the bedrock of experience, uncovering the essential structures that make knowledge and reality intelligible in the first place.
So the final thought to leave you, the listener, with is this. What are the implications of taking this phenomenological stance seriously? How might focusing on the structure of consciousness itself change how you think about reality, about what it means for something to be objective, or even about the foundations of science?
Right. How does looking at how things appear, rather than just what appears, alter your understanding of your own experience?
And thinking about that last point on intersubjectivity, how does grounding objectivity in shared understanding, mediated by empathy, open up new ways to think about our social world, communication, and shared knowledge? It certainly gives you a lot to chew on.
Definitely. It's a demanding philosophy, but one that asks fundamental questions.
Indeed. Until our next deep dive, keep exploring.